Hey everyone, this is Adam Ellenboss from Nightlight Astrology, and today I'm going to be joined by my friends and colleagues Dana and Alex to break down your horoscopes for the month of November. There are a few major transits this month that we're going to be looking at for you. We're going to go through all 12 rising signs, and we'll be looking at Pluto's ingress into Aquarius, which is happening now as Pluto completes its journey through Capricorn. No more Capricorn. Now it's just Aquarius for almost like 20 years. So we've got horoscopes prepared for you on Pluto's shift into Aquarius. We're also going to be looking at the major Mars-Pluto opposition that starts the month off right after the new moon in Scorpio. This Mars-Pluto opposition is therefore ruling the new moon. So we'll be looking at that. A few other tidbits we'll throw in along the way. So that is our agenda for today. Before we get into it, as always, remember to like and subscribe. Our goal is to see if we can accomplish 80,000 subscribers on the channel by the spring equinox, fall equinox if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. We really appreciate all of you for subscribing. It's free to do so. It helps our channel and community grow. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. Our promotion right now for the month is, if you go to the events page, click on live talks, my new webinar for November is coming up, Pluto in Aquarius, AI, Aliens, and New World Orders. This is going to be an in-depth look at the archetypal meaning of Pluto in Aquarius, both collectively, historically, and personally. It's also a rare chance to get to hear me weigh in on some of the mundane elements of this planetary transit, as we'll be looking at the last time Pluto was in Aquarius and some of what we can expect collectively as well as personally. Some other webinars coming up you can check out there. When you sign up, of course, you get the webinar link, and if you can't attend live, we get the recording to you later. Also, go to the courses page. First year course, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, begins November 16th. It's a great election to begin studying astrology under. Pluto entering Aquarius within the year as you're studying. Uranus will be entering Gemini. Some really nice airy transits for studying an ancient hermetic science. At the bottom of the page, you'll find enrollment options. Although the sale is over, need-based tuition is still open. So if you are someone who would like to take the program, need a little bit of help, you have a limited or fixed income, please do take advantage of the tuition assistance. We have that there because we don't want people to be priced out of studying a sacred science. And we know that everyone is coming from a lot of different situations. So we try to make sure that astrology is accessible. And on that note, I'm also very excited to announce that this month in November, stay tuned for more information. I'll probably even be doing a live stream and introducing you to our new staff of we have an affordable reading service we'll be launching, and a new staff of readers who will be taking that service on as our staff. We're very excited to introduce affordable readings. It's something that you all helped us do through our Kickstarters over the past 2 years. So that service is finally about to launch, and I'll let you know more about that as soon as it's ready, which should be any day now, really getting ready to go here in hopefully the first couple weeks of November. So on that note, I'm really excited to take a look at your horoscopes this month, and welcome back, Dana and Alex.
Yay!
Yeah. Okay, let me just...
all here.
I'm realizing that... There we go. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, your voice just got very Darth Vader-y when you did that.
I just realized that I didn't have for our power went out recently, and whenever it goes out, for some reason, I have to set the default microphone over again because it defaults after the power goes off and back. It goes back to my computer's, whatever it is, the computer mic that's built in, which sounds terrible.
This definitely sounds better. Yes.
Yeah. Even though I'll set it as default, for like the next 10 times I log in, I have to reset it as default. And I don't know why it won't just stay. Just stay.
These are the behind the scenes things that nobody really knows, Adam. that we suffer with as astrologers, you know.
That is absolutely correct. If you guys want to know more about Dana and Alex at the end today, I'm going to tell you more about how you can book readings with them, get in touch with them, stay in contact with their creative work as astrologers. So I'll make sure that I plug them at the end of today. But how have you guys been doing? How have things been going with Mars in Cancer? We went through an eclipse season this last month of October. Where are you guys at? How are things for you guys?
Dana, why don't you lead us off?
Okay. Alex is ready to go there.
I'm going to give that right to you.
Yeah. So the Libra eclipse was in my first house, and I was an emotional wreck. I was very, very emotional. Like, you guys know I teach high school English. I told a story, like a personal story in class that day, and I just felt like really embarrassed. Like, I felt embarrassed about being vulnerable, or like I perceived that I was being vulnerable and I felt weird about it. Like, I don't know, it sort of unraveled this whole thread for me of like feeling weird about being vulnerable. So that's been a thing. And then also I've been thinking a lot, like, I have a baby. He's 20 months. His birthday's in February. He'll be 2. But I've been thinking a lot about how, like, he is not mine. Does that make sense? Like, I don't, I'm his mother, but he is a separate human. And it's been a lot to process. Like, might seem kind of obvious, but it's been something I've had to really digest this month.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't have kids, but that would seem like for every parent in some way going through that at different points in your kids' lives. That sounds really profound.
Steep.
Yeah. It's just that Khalil Gibran quote. I think it's Khalil Gibran, where it's like, oh, is it Khalil Gibran? Where am I remembering this from? But he's talking about how our kids come through us.
Yeah.
They aren't ours. They come through us. And, and in many ways, the process of parenting is a sort of spiritual midwifery. Like, are we preparing them to grow and learn and just continue flourishing in this lifetime? Knowing that it's many lifetimes, and for whatever reason, the gods have put us into this little constellation, and hopefully we grow not just because we just like beat each other up karmically and then heal from it. Just like one way of growing. And hopefully like life kind of beats us up and we learn and then we grow. But it's also like, can we foster a safe, beautiful, tranquil, flowing experience as much as we can for each other? And like, that's hard work.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Wow.
How about you, Alex?
Well, I was saying to these guys before we got on, like, part of me, the enlightened spiritual master in me wants to say, Pluto and Capricorn, thank you for these beautiful lessons. I'm so grateful for, and now I'm just like, bye-bye. I am going to my 7th house. I'm done with the 6th house. I am all set with Pluto and Capricorn. But no, I think that this has been a very, one of the things I noticed about Pluto a lot, and this has been a slow burn over the last 16 years for me, is Pluto will get you down to a base level truth. You may not like it. It may not be comfortable or easy, but what I've been coming to, and I'm having Mars opposing Pluto from my 12th to my 6th house. So there's a lot of unconscious, deeper, more bedrock stuff, primal stuff, especially from being very young, and coming to terms with it. And it's disturbing, but also really healing at the same time. I guess it sounds paradoxical, but it's a really interesting, I put my Buddhist hat on. It's kind of an interesting idea that's arising, which is this sort of, Pluto, I think, can be really, really healing, but Pluto's going to put your face in it.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to see whatever you really didn't want to see or couldn't see. And a lot of that stuff is very underworld. It's very, primal, and it's a lot of images, and it's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. So I've been doing a lot of work with that. So it's been intense, but all together, without being, just toxically positive about it, it has been very healing and grounding in a very strange way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I am absolutely blown away. Mars is in Cancer, with how much has come up within my family that I wasn't anticipating. Health issues for a few family members that have been coming up, and like I've shared a little bit about it on my channel with my dad having a surgery. My sister's been having some health challenges, so it's been it's interesting. It's interesting also because I think that people who have a lot of Cancerian energy are often wired to go through major personal changes when family karma changes. So like when I've gone through major parallels at different times in my life. I got married the year my parents got divorced. That wasn't planned, so there's been a lot of like important moments of growth for me personally have come at very interesting crossroads for other people in my family or extended family. So I've been fascinated by that as Mars has been in Cancer so far, and a lot of that kind of stuff has been coming up. I was also like, I was amazed at how accurately you can track certain kinds of events with Mars. I think I mentioned last time, like we had a plumbing issue with the dishwasher or the garbage disposal. My daughter has her ascendant rulers, Mercury and Capricorn. She got injury at gymnastics, then got sick, and it was just like perfectly timed to the opposition to her ascendant ruler. I think stuff like that is like, what I find really interesting is to think that even a cold, like just a nasty cold you get for a week, is somehow karmic and able to be tracked and seen in some ways with astrology. Like, what does it's like, I'm just curious, what kind of karma is burning off during a cold? Like, I think I might get a little bit more reflective about that the next time I have a cold. So
what complex web was weaving together?
Exactly.
Naughty nose.
I mean, this month is I think a month of, obviously we start off the month here in the United States with the election. And while we don't get into that so much, nobody can deny who's into astrology the proximity of the Mars-Pluto opposition to the election. Yeah. That's a very powerful symbol constellated right around a major political event in the United States. The new moon in, so let me put the chart up. Let's start looking at some of this together. We kind of preview where we're heading with these horoscopes. So we can see that the new moon in Scorpio is forming here. This is Halloween, but if we step it forward a day, we'll see that it's early morning on November 1st that the new moon in Scorpio forms. And that new moon in Scorpio is hosted by the fallen Mars at the anaretic degree that's opposing Pluto. So, I mean, this is a moon cycle that promises some real drama. I mean, I don't say that lightly because I don't like to whip up fear unnecessarily. A lot of moon cycles have some intensity here or there. This one is really dramatic. I mean, there's just no other way of putting it. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone will experience drama, but I think that it's likely that if you don't, you probably will know someone who does, because these transits are big enough that, one or two people in your life will probably have a big impact, especially if they have planets in late degrees of cardinal signs, early degrees of fixed signs. What to speak of just, you'll witness it in the collective. You'll see it in the news that this is not going to be a quiet headline. That's just not how these transits tend to work. The Mars-Pluto opposition, as nuclear as it is also very cathartic, right? I mean, it can really create some positive transformation, even if the energy feels a little hostile or confrontational or sort of intense. The shifts that are made in these late degrees of cardinal signs are often necessary. And so there's something relieving when the dust settles. It's like, okay, well, now I can move on. And I didn't like that, but I can see how maybe that was a necessary thing. So these are some of the things that come to mind with this cycle. And then as the month goes on, the early part of the month is very intense. In some ways, our horoscopes are really geared toward the first 5 days of the month. But then the other really important shift is here on the 19th. Once we get to the 19th of November, Pluto will move into Aquarius, where it will now stay for 2 decades. So we've got an ingress of a major outer planet into a new sign, and that's always going to be top candidate for the biggest event of the month. If you have Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto shifting signs, the ingress into a new sign will activate a new set of topics in your chart. And for everybody, especially if you use whole signs, I'm talking about, of course, but in horoscopes, that's for sure. All horoscopes are whole signs. So this will create a major shift of focus from Pluto being in one house in your chart to another. And that shift for many people is very acute. Like there'll be events that sort of announce, hey, Pluto's in this new place in your life, doing a new kind of work. And there will be events that will somehow foreshadow what the next 2 decades are about. And so that doesn't mean that they will be exactly about the event, but the themes, the tensions, the kinds of underlying psychological dynamics will continue to unfold from the ingress point forward. We've had a few ingresses already, but this last one is also important because it's the final one. So before we actually break these down, I want to give a chance to for Dana and Alex to weigh in on some of these transits before we look at your horoscopes. Like what about these transits stands out to you guys, or what kind of images or ideas come to your mind when you think about this month?
I've been thinking a lot about Mars, just because it feels like between now when we're recording this, like October 23rd, right, until what we're talking about, Mars opposite Pluto, all roads lead back to Mars in Cancer. The new moon being ruled by Mars. Mars is making some contact with the outer planets prior to opposing Pluto. So I just feel like that, like if you're tracking transits and you're trying to use astrology as a mindfulness practice, paying attention to what Mars is doing is a really good option right now. And even reflecting on what it's been doing since it entered Cancer. The endings also seem like such a huge theme, not just for, Mars and Cancer, but obviously Pluto, and then being at the 29th degree. Like there's something's coming to an end. And so that's kind of what I've been thinking about. What about you, Alex?
I just want to say that I think this Mars Pluto opposition is like really unnecessary.
Best comment of the day.
A little obnoxious. I'm just going to put that out there, but I agree. I agree with everything you guys are saying. That I don't want to use too gross of an image here, but it is a healing one where I think Mars opposing Pluto can be a little bit like lancing an abscess. It's like something that's really stuck or putrid or toxic or congested, and then Mars comes along and it sort of like cuts loose what has been toxic in some way. And I think what's interesting is, as Dana was alluding to, is Mars will just have trine Neptune before going into this opposition and sextiled Uranus with the way that the outer planets are arranged right now. I don't know, I feel like Neptune, soft aspects from Neptune can be helpful in the sense of sort of clearing something or washing something away, of like, irrigating the wound kind of idea. And the other thing, just to, and I'm trying not to be the hyper optimistic Sag here, but just to notice is that Mars will pick up dignity very quickly after this opposition, moving into Leo, and be in mutual reception with the Sun. The Sun will be in Mars' sign and Mars will be in the Sun sign. Now, I don't know if that's going to tamp down anything that may be arising around that time, but it feels to me kind of like a massive cathartic moment that's followed by some amount of forward motion, at least up until Mars begins to station in early December. There's something that feels like it can move forward a little bit more, and then we might have to revisit some of these ideas as Mars begins to retrograde. But those are just kind of my general thoughts on the way this is all kind of playing out as they move.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that it is really interesting that the Mars Sun the square comes into a mutual reception. That feels to me like there's an amplification of that kind of muscular and authoritative executive quality in the sky. It's like Mars and the Sun, when they work together, is sort of like the king and his army. They have like the right, Mars is sometimes called the right arm of the Sun. It feels like there's a mobilization of resources, and this is what I mean, just speaking for a second about the mundane quality of this does speak to the potential for clashes when it comes to transitions of power, right? Like a transition of power in an election where we already know that there's likely to be contested results and so on and so forth. This just feels like the setup for complicated issues about succession or complicated issues when it comes to power and leadership and authority. At the same time, I feel like on a personal level, one thing that's nice is that if Mars and Pluto in opposition kind of put a fire under your ass for one reason or another, the kind of willpower and executive thinking, like, okay, shit, I got to do something. I got to act on, like, when something powerful happens. And, like I think of, for example, I think Scorpios and Capricorns are particularly wonderful at this because of their affinity for Mars. Aries too, to a certain extent, but just that, like, okay, when life throws us into the ICU, so to speak, then we start acting. We start like, I've got this, and you know what? If there's some trauma involved in this, I'm sure there is. I'll have to deal with it later. I have to act under a critical stressor right now. And some people really thrive in that space, and others find it excruciating, and it's very personal, I think. But these are good energies in a way. Like if there is a crisis that you experience emotionally, personally, in some sphere of your life, I do feel like the ongoing benefit of this cycle is that, yeah, the Sun-Mars mutual opposition or mutual reception sort of says, okay, well, here's some mojo to handle it, to sort of step up to the plate and handle the challenge of it.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. So Pluto going into Aquarius. What do you guys think about that? Any general thoughts you want to throw out there?
I think this is a really, I think this is a really interesting. What we've been seeing so far, obviously, is the talk of AI, the talk of as you mentioned, AI. Was it AI, aliens, and New World Orders? The name of your talk? Yeah. Those sorts of ideas. I think that what I'm excited for with Pluto and Aquarius, and you see this in previous Pluto and Aquarius periods, is the way it often shifts the paradigm through which we see the universe or the world. The scientific discoveries. I think Copernicus's heliocentric theory was published around this time in the 1500s. Or there was also the discovery of Uranus. I think was actually when Pluto just moved into Aquarius in the late 18th century. So I think I'm really excited for I think one of the things Pluto and Aquarius seems to do on a general level is it sort of it despecializes things. It decentralizes things. And what it seems to have done for us in previous periods is sort of debase the sense that we're these very special beings on a very special planet in the middle of a very special place. And it's more like, I get the idea of aliens, Adam. I don't know if this is where you're going with it in your talk, but this idea of maybe not aliens landing on the White House lawn, but if we were to discover it, could be. Be fun.
Will Smith, he'll be with us.
Just get it, Mr. President.
Exactly.
But yeah, it could be just imagine if we just discovered that there was life on the ocean in Europa, under Europa's ice cap, or microscopic life on Mars. That would completely revamp the way that we see ourselves in the cosmos and everything. So that's I'm going to stay on that sort of exciting possibility base for that right now.
Yeah.
With Pluto and Aquarius. Yeah.
I love that. When I've been thinking about Pluto and Aquarius, I can't help but think about it from the point of view of Pluto and Capricorn. And what stands out to me, when I think about it collectively, is the concentration of power and the idea of the 1%. I feel like that has been so exacerbated by Pluto and Capricorn. And I've seen, at least, and this could be totally subjective, but from where I stand, the people have gotten less and less, since 2008. And it's interesting because 2007 was when I graduated high school. And that was sort of when the world was promised to us, go to college. It's going to be great. You're going to get a job and you're going to be able to pay for your loans. And then it's surprise, there's a job market crash and the housing bubble. And there was just problem after problem, collective issue after collective issue. I'm really hopeful for Pluto and Aquarius, and obviously it's Pluto. There's going to be some confrontation. There's going to be looking under the bed and seeing the scary shit we don't want to see. That's going to happen, but I'm really hopeful that Pluto and Capricorn maybe mobilized people. And now with Pluto and Aquarius, we can kind of shift the power dynamic that has gotten really skewed since 2008.
Yeah. I note, like Alex, some of the previous historical cycles. One of the things I talk about in this upcoming webinar I'm doing is extensively is the connection to the American Revolution, which was Pluto and Aquarius. And then the simultaneous entrance of Neptune into Aries, which coincided with the American Civil War. I don't, no matter which way you look at it, I can't see how the next year or two with these ingresses happening of Pluto into Aquarius and Neptune into Aries don't lead to some major political transformations and social and cultural transformations in the West, quote unquote, the United States, obviously, in particular, even Uranus into Gemini, the potential for the light twin and the dark twin in a dual party politics system comes to my mind. That happens next June alongside of Neptune and Saturn and Aries, alongside of Pluto and Aquarius. Like, I think we're reaching some kind of revolutionary tipping point culturally, politically. Pluto and Aquarius, I agree, is like very promising when it comes to the potential for a new vision, a different way of understanding. And, unfortunately, one truth about America historically that I think I understand is that crisis points become inflection points for growth and evolution in our culture in a way that's kind of unfortunate, but we're also young, and as a country, as a civilization, we're relatively young, and just like kids that often learn through bumps and bruises. And I mean, it doesn't surprise me that it's sort of like a youngish country that's come on the stage with such revolutionary spirit behind it would go through future periods of revolutionary turmoil. Yeah. So I'm kind of like anticipating that. I don't know what that means. I don't have any. I'm just purely reflecting on that astrologically, right? I'm not trying to imply anything about that. It's just that's what I kind of expect, and I expect that regardless of who wins the election. Honestly, I just expect that because that's where the astrology is heading. But yeah, Pluto and Aquarius for us personally, I think one of the things that excites me about it is that there's some opportunity for us to, take that spaceship up to the 20,000 foot perspective. I've heard it was William Shatner who got to go into I don't remember, it was Jeff Bezos' shuttle or whatever it was, and he got to go up to the moon, or I don't know what exactly happened, but they went up to space. They went into space, and he was deeply moved by the view of Earth from outside of the Earth. Aquarius is like that for us. Maybe not all at once, but in a process over a period of time, it sort of allows us to see the Earth as this big ball where all of the boundaries are artificial. You can't see country lines. You can't, you just see Earth and water and clouds. And Aquarius, I think, has the potential to give us a really objective view of something. And then a bigger, broader view helps us start to reconfigure things. So I don't always like what it takes to get us to a broader, bigger view, because sometimes it takes crisis. And Pluto will certainly have us looking at power and fairness and compassion and all sorts of things in order to help us step out of the norms and get that bigger view. But it's still very promising that it can provide us with a kind of a brave revolutionary vision that we maybe haven't considered yet.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about Pluto and Aquarius, and the symbolism of that, Adam, like revealing corrupted data bits, seeing, what's in the system that, there's Aquarians are usually so system oriented and can usually see the connections between so many little bits of information. I could see Pluto and Aquarius just being like, we're going to have to look at like where the program has some corrupted data, what needs to be extracted, pulled out, reorganized. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. Are you guys ready to dive into horoscopes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, let's do it. We're going to alternate. Alex is taking our cardinal signs. I am taking fixed. Dana will be taking mutable, and we'll comment on each other's horoscopes as we go. We will be alternating every other episode with Pisces starting first, but Pisces started first last time. So I know in Pisces world, they're probably like, well, we need at least 400 times in a row before this is equal, but we can't heal all of the past at once. We have to just do it incrementally. No, I'm kidding. So, okay. So we're going to start with Aries this week. Next time we'll flip and we'll start with Pisces, and we'll just keep alternating like that because I got so much feedback from so many Pisceans out there who are like, oh my God, you finally see me. You really do care.
So, I've always laughed all the time and everything. I just get no one thinks about me and I get rushed because they're at the end and oh my goodness.
And then it gets into this vicious archetypal circle where you go, well, you're last because you're such a whiner, and they go, yeah, but you always put me last and that's why I whine. And then it's like chicken or the egg.
Can't get out of it. Yeah.
I'm just kidding. All right. So let's start with Aries. Alex, take us away.
All right. Well, Aries, first of all, you're first again. So congratulations. You're back where you're supposed to be. The beginning of everything. I think, I think this is a very interesting transit for Aries. And we might have talked a little bit about this last month with Mars in Cancer, your ascendant ruler moving through your fourth house in its fall in a water sign. There's a feeling here of having been in a very much more private emotional space than you've been used to, a contemplative, slower moving, having to really be inside of your feels a lot more than you're used to being. And now as Mars hits this opposition to Pluto, there's some kind of cathartic moment where it feels like you can come out of that private emotional space, a place where usually fire signs are much more sort of, I guess the word is exhibitionist, right? We're just out there sharing everything with everybody all the time. Maybe that's just me as a Sag. But this is very much of a much more muted transit of Mars through Cancer. So as Mars opposes Pluto and then is about to move right into your 5th house in Leo, there's something about like a rocket ship back into the public sphere in some way to me. That's like there's a cathartic moment of recognizing like whatever you were dealing with in terms of the emotions or the feelings this month is cleared, or maybe there's something dramatic that sort of touches them off, and it allows you to move into a much more sort of ambitiously creative space. And then, you know, as Pluto moves into, which is Mars moving into your 5th house, but then as Pluto moves into Aquarius in your 11th, I've just been seeing this for Aries risings as, you know, kind of sorting through your friend list and seeing who's a friend and who's a frenemy. Like who's really got your back in a solid way, wants to help you move forward, and who you want to help move forward collectively. That's very kind of Aquarian 11th house idea. But also like looking at like who really has your back and who has ulterior motives for being in your network or being in your friend group. And there's more of a subconscious or subterranean power struggle going on. So those are just my initial thoughts for Aries in that way.
Yeah. You know, I'm thinking about the confrontation with this opposition. Alex, what you said about sort of like being in your feels, and I think that's really important to think about, like, what is it that's got me there? Is it this, like with Mars and Cancer, maybe it's like a feeling of impotency, almost like where do I go? What do I do? And maybe it's coming from within yourself, your inner world, or it's coming from your family. But the Pluto opposition feels like a catalyst, maybe a scary or confronting one, but one that allows you, once Mars enters Leo, to have some courage to create something for yourself. So it almost alchemizes that kind of wishy-washy Cancer. And that's probably true. That's true for all of us. But I love it for Aries because now it's in your 5th house. It's trining your 1st house. Maybe you're making something for yourself. Like just because you want to, just because it's beautiful, or just because it's fun. Like we're talking about the 5th house. So I think that there's a lot of freedom maybe on the horizon for Aries risings.
Yeah, I love that. I wonder about the idea that Arians are like disentangling themselves from something right now. That the way you present yourself to the world is wrapped up in an old story, maybe one that comes from your past, from your family. And maybe there's some way that you're trying to create a new story about who you are. And that story you can't move into this new version of yourself with the same old past, you know, carrying the same old baggage, like needs to be released. And then maybe there's also some shift here with respect to social groups, institutions, community, and that different community or different people are needed to complete the story. That it's almost like the connection between family and social life, or family and professional life, or family history or ancestral history, your biography, and how it is connected to who you are in the world and where you belong in the world. And there's maybe some pretty dynamic changes happening with respect to who you are and how you show up in the world, or what people are the right people for you in the world. Those are some of the things that come to my mind for Aries given this shift, but certainly major transformation around groups of people, community, allies, friends, maybe being triggered by some kind of deeper work around family karma. That's what comes to my mind.
And don't worry, you get to work on it all again at the beginning of the year when Mars retrogrades back into Cancer.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Let's go forward to Taurus next. And I'm going to be taking the fixed signs here. So I'm a Taurus rising, so this is fun. So Mars is opposing Pluto across the 3rd and 9th house axis. Well, one thing that I think a significant thing that can happen here is changing how you think, changing how you feel, changing your mental, emotional, intellectual makeup, and shifting your more deeply held beliefs, your philosophical orientation. So I think about this as anything that could come up that dramatically shifts your thinking, the way you process or communicate, emotional intelligence, just kind of the mental, intellectual, and philosophical realm, as well as I would connect it to emotional patterns, because of that Mars in Cancer in the 3rd. There is maybe a significant, almost like a paradigm shift that's happening for Tauruses. I wouldn't be surprised if there were cathartic events that led to a dramatic shift of mental, emotional, or intellectual or like spiritual priorities. It may not be that the things that change your mind or your paradigm are purely academic. In other words, it could be that, there's a trigger point in family or in a relationship or some other part of your life that causes you to just really deeply rethink things. I also see this as a major transition of paradigm, belief, and thought that's connected to Pluto entering the career house and just starting to bring an energy of transformation, maybe a greater awareness of things like your power as a professional or your lack of power, the power of various institutions or organizations or people that you work with, power structures and power dynamics, all the Pluto 10th house stuff, as well as just the potential for Plutonian transformation around your vocation or career. So those two things are where I see the action for Tauruses. What do you guys think?
Well, looking at Pluto moving into the 10th house, and I've seen this with a lot of Taurus rising clients, is if you have been feeling the itch or the itch you need to scratch around your career in some way, shape, or form for a while, Pluto moving into the 10th house will really put a fire under you. And I think that begins with what you were saying, Adam, about what you were noticing between the 3rd and the 9th house opposition here. As Pluto moves, wherever Pluto goes, whether into a new house or an aspect, there's usually something that has been ignored or under the surface for a while. Something, it's just kind of felt like the splinter in the mind that all of a sudden is like, I got to do something. And it feels very like determined and focused. And so I think this might be a time where, you're looking at how you feel. Do you feel powerful or powerless in your career? Are you doing something that has a base level primal sense of this is what's right for me? This is I am at this point in my life, I am doing the right thing. I am living my dharma in the way that I was intended to. Because Pluto, when you try to futz around with Pluto and delude yourself with Pluto, it doesn't work. You just know you're not quite hitting the mark. But there's sort of that felt place where I know that I'm in the right, excuse me, I'm in the right vocation. I'm in the right place for me to be seen in the world right now. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in November when that is a final transit back into the Aquarius.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, definitely purging paradigms. Like if we had to give a slogan for Pluto in the 9th, with the opposition in the 3rd, it's like you're going about your day, you're doing the things you always do, and suddenly something within you breaks and you're like, this is wrong. Kind of like what you were saying, Alex, like, you know what? Can't do it. This is not working for me anymore. And you kind of realize maybe the disconnect between how you're living and what you believe or think you should be doing, like a disconnection between your actions and your inner world. And I think that's underscored by the fact that Pluto is moving into the 10th house, the house of like action, of where you be. I don't know, that sounded dumb, but I think you guys know what I mean. It's your public roles, but it's what you do in the world. And with Pluto leaving your 9th house, it just feels like maybe you're taking that learning of Pluto and Capricorn with you, of like, okay, if this is really what I believe and what my operating principles are and what I value, it's time for me to be about that.
Yep. Yeah, I love that, because I was reflecting recently on the fact as a Taurus rising that my study of astrology literally began very close, like within a month of Pluto entering the 9th house. Whatever these 16 years later. And, it's interesting that I'm writing outlines for my first book, technical book about astrology. I'm writing another book right now that's more storytelling, but outlining something like a textbook for some of my programs. It's so funny that process of shifting into writing about has occurred as Pluto's made the shift from the 9th to the 10th. I feel like that's a simple example from my life as a Taurus rising that matches precisely what Dana is saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's exciting, Adam. I didn't know you were I knew you were writing, but I didn't know you were writing like textbooks.
Well, I have right now I'm writing a book, which is really meant to use storytelling as a way to understand what divination is. And sort of, that's sort of the biggest first project I really have been working on for a long time. But then, as you get into a creative flow, at least as I am, I'm starting to envision and plot out subsequent creative projects as I'm realizing my life can finally figure out I have the time and space to do it. Right. But anyway, that is just one small example that I thought I would use to just kind of reinforce how spot on you were with that one.
Well, thank you.
Let's go to Gemini, and I'm going to hand this over to Dana. And guys, I'm going to mute myself and go refill my water because my throat is like, I'm not going to be able to make it all the way through if I don't. So I'm going to hand you guys the wheel. Dana, take over and tell us about Gemini.
Okay, Dana, take the wheel. Here we go. Try not to wreck the car. Okay, so Mars is in the 2nd house for my Gemini risings. And I am just generally, for all of us, thinking about Mars in Cancer as a feeling of aimlessness, of impotence. But when we're talking about the 2nd house, it's like, what do I have to give? What do I have to offer? There might be like some feelings of self-doubt creeping around. / it might be frustration around like what you share and what you don't share, especially as we approach this opposition with Pluto in your 8th house, which has obviously been here for a long time. And it's kind of been forcing you Gemini risings to really reckon with, your agreements and like what is shared and what is not, and what that brings up for you. I would imagine as a Gemini rising, you might feel kind of natural in partnership. I don't know. I'm not a Gemini rising, but it makes sense to me that would be kind of a natural way for you to be, is in partnership. But that doesn't mean that sharing is easy. It doesn't mean that owning something is easy. And so it would be good to reflect on what Pluto and Capricorn has brought up for you around the 8th house topics, like karmic debts, literal debts, the things you own with other people. Let's see. Yeah, Pluto's moving into your 9th house. And so we're going to be looking at those paradigms purging, kind of like we were just talking about with Taurus risings. And what do you believe? What do you value? Mars is going to be moving into your 3rd house, and it feels like there's some courageous action around tidying up the minutia of your life, and like, okay, how am I going to structure my day? Maybe how do I need to communicate differently in order to like be heard in the way that I want to be heard? Just feels like there's a lot of changes with like the way you do partnership, thinking about the 8th house, and then maybe that refining your beliefs with Pluto moving into the 9th.
I love all of that. And I love this idea of like the idea of catharsis or purging of something with Pluto, because that's often what it feels like. There's like, I was thinking, Pluto to me is like the cosmic rotor-rooter in a lot of ways, coming along, just unclogging the drain in something that's been stuck for a while. I mean, I see this, the phrase that keeps coming to mind for me is a catharsis of worth. With Mars, moving through its fall in the 2nd house. This would depend on, for a Gemini rising where your moon is, but there's a feeling here of wanting to reclaim one's sense of worth that leads to a sense of emotional safety and feeling like, it's not just worth because to get what I want or manifest something, but a sense of worth of like, when I feel valuable and worthy, I put myself in situations where I feel protected and safe and able to be who I am. And there's something about this, like I'm seeing the 2nd house more through that lens right now. And I think Pluto moving into the 9th house is an amazing signature of beginning a deep and in-depth study of something sciencey, philosophical. It could be astrology, astrology or tarot or something like that. Like that is a really, or taking on some sense of greater sort of solemn responsibility, as well. Some kind of feeling of, not just thinking about philosophy, but getting a degree, not just one, thinking about the law, but going to law school. Those sorts of things would come to mind too with Pluto moving into the ninth.
Yeah. You guys remember I was talking about some of the work I've been doing connecting the meanings of the houses in the trines to one another. And to me, I find it really interesting that Geminis are about to enter into a space where Pluto will not only be in Aquarius, but Uranus will be in Gemini. And so the idea that there's a revolution of a Gemini's sense of self. And of course, that first house was called Dharma. The ninth house was related to Dharma. That learning and personal revolution are about to accompany one another for Geminis. This coincides with a year where Jupiter's also in your first house in Gemini. I feel like this is a time where Geminis are going to life school. And it could be a literal school. It could be life school. But the revolution of identity and of that first house sense of what I'm born to do, who I'm born to be, and how that coincides with a period of learning and of intellectual or spiritual or like philosophical revolution. That's what feels like is very close at hand for Geminis right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's move on. I'm sorry I missed the rest of what you guys had to say, but thankfully now I can talk without my throat being on fire.
Remember we were recording last year, Adam, and I had that cold and like I couldn't stop coughing through the phone.
Yeah, totally. Oh my God. I'm actually like, so my oldest daughter got COVID last week, and thankfully she tested positive for COVID. And thankfully we somehow the whole rest of our house managed to come out without getting sick. It's like,
amazing.
All right, great. I'll take it. But anyway, no, my throat is sore today because I just recorded several talks this morning, getting ready for some busy days that I have coming up. So I recorded a bunch in advance, and I'm recording this. So my voice is like, what are you doing? Why are we talking so much? Okay, Cancer, we're going to hand this over to Alex, and I will illustrate for you.
Okay, so for Cancer risings, we have Mars in your first house opposing Pluto in your seventh, and Pluto about to move into your eighth, and Mars about to move into your second. So, interesting. I could see this being a point for if you felt like there's been sort of a crisis in your identity, in like who you have believed yourself to be, or maybe I think this is particularly for Cancer risings, maybe who others have anticipated or needed you to be. If there's some sense of like, Cancer risings often tend to be, there's a caretakery role. There's a desire to sort of archetypally mother and caretake and do those sorts of things. Mars moving into the first house and through the first house might needle the places where it's like, where has that gone a little overboard? Where do I want to be individual? Where do I want to do my thing? Where do I want to feel like, I could see this Mars-Pluto opposition as like the scene in any movie where they're like, you know what? This is my life and God damn it, I'm going to live it. That sort of feeling. Don't you tell me that I'm not. And then they march out the door and they go live some fabulous life in France or whatever. But, I also think that coincides with Pluto moving into the eighth, which I think Pluto in the eighth is a really interesting transit because there's a sense of like, really churning the ground of your deep energetic entanglements. Like when we do energy work, the really strong energy cords are the eighth house. And I think that can both be a deepening of those cords and connections when it's healthy. But I think what Pluto also does is it shows you like this cord or this connection or this entanglement is toxic. It's not working anymore. It's overstayed its welcome. It's past its expiration date. And you really have no better ally in the pantheon of planets than Pluto to really unroot some of that deeper stuff that may feel like it's very difficult to let go of or very difficult to bring out. But Pluto gives it some amount of like really getting it up by the root and allowing your connections to feel a little bit more equal in their exchange and a little bit more equal in their in their exchange, that you feel more balanced with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking very much along the same lines, Alex. Sort of how, as a Cancer rising, right, you maybe it's easy for you to step into the caretaker role. It's comfortable for you to step into that role. Mars in the first house saying, yeah, when is it going to be my turn? And Pluto has been in the seventh house for so long, acting like a mirror and kind of showing you almost a similar thing of like, your relationship, it can't be everything for you, right? Like you need your own thing. And when Pluto moves into the eighth house, I just kept thinking about like enmeshment and the idea of control and letting go, and how caretaking, when it's toxic, and of course it's not always, like it's a beautiful thing that Cancerians are like this, but it can become toxic because it can almost be a form of control, and kind of clinging to like, this is my role in this relationship, here's how I'm needed. And maybe Pluto can compost that a little bit and kind of show you where like, is this rooted in fear or is this rooted in love?
That is that. I really like the way you put that. It got me thinking. There's also, if you think about this as a culminating moment in Pluto's history of the seventh house for Cancers, I wonder what things with a lot of history behind them that are very personal. And one of the reasons they could be very personal is not just because they have to do with you, but because, let's say you're married, you're in a relationship with someone. I could see this as just a something with a lot of history behind it coming to a head that's very personal. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be about a relational struggle or conflict, although, it could be like a kind of cathartic or like a crossroads moment of death or transformation or crisis in a relationship or a marriage. Like, sure, that's like one of the most basic like textbook entries you could have for Mars opposite Pluto across the first and seventh. But it also comes to my mind that like, if your husband, gets laid off, if your spouse's mother dies, like I'm not seeing anything in particular. I'm just saying significant events in a spouse's life that have a dramatic impact on you personally could also be signified here, because things with a lot of history behind them that are related to someone you love or are close with could have a very direct and personal impact on you right now, even though it's not really about you. It's about someone that you're close to. So I would look for that as well. The other thing that I wonder about is this kind of cathartic moment is leading to maybe some kind of revisioning or restructuring of how you view karmic interactions in general. Like when Pluto moves into Aquarius in the eighth house after coming off from something like this, it makes me think, boy, this could be a really important moment of greater objective reflection on like fate itself. I think, for example, about let's just say that again, I'm just going to make up a story. Let's say that your spouse loses someone that they love, and it's someone that and maybe it's one of the first people you've ever known personally who has died. Pluto immediately enters the eighth house, and all of a sudden you're reflecting on karma, destiny, fate, and some pretty weighty existential themes, the kinds of things that lead people to become a Buddhist, or the kinds of things that lead people to take up a spiritual path. You're contemplating the reality of impermanence and death and getting a more objective view of it than you ever have. So I just wonder about what Cancerians are like witnessing or holding space for, as well as what they might be going through personally in relationships. Well, let's move on to Leos. So we've got, and this is where I read for Alex personally.
Thank you. Don't keep the Leos waiting at him. Don't keep them waiting.
So I'm going to back this up. I'm going to back the clock up by a day so that I can get Mars into, let's get Mars into Cancer. There we go. Okay, so here we have for Leo risings the 12th house. The 12th house Mars-Pluto opposition across the 12th and 6th, excuse me. The fact that this is coming off a new moon in Scorpio that's ruled by that Mars in the 4th house, to me, looks like family karma for Leos. What are the deeper and more difficult emotions that you have with respect to your family, your mom, your dad, how you were raised, your upbringing? Or what are the secrets? Or what are the sicknesses? What is sort of in that more subterranean space that is coming up for some kind of purging, healing, cleansing, transformation? Even if it's just psychological conditioning from your past, from how you were raised, from the way in which you somehow participate in mom or dad's karma. How also things like the living environment itself, let's just set aside family karma and let's just say your living space and the relation that we have with home, safety, privacy. The home should ideally be, we were talking off camera before we got on, we were talking about having a home base and how helpful that is when it comes to surviving difficult times. Even if it's just your own apartment, if it's your own bedroom, if it's a family that is not perfect, but you connect to and they help you weather difficult storms. So whatever that is, I feel like for Leos right now, there's catharsis happening around home, family, history, your safe space, the need to address what feels like safety and stability. There's a need for depth and vulnerability and authenticity, I think, too, for Leos. I think with Mars subsequently going right into the 1st house, Pluto going right into the 7th house, we're also talking maybe about different values or styles of relationship, of leadership, of like how responsibilities are shared or split within the home. And we're talking about some kind of catharsis that could also lead a Leo to say, I've got this. Let me help, let me lead, let me take a position of authority because someone needs help or something needs to get done, or we need to create safety where it feels like there's instability or something like that. Those are some of the things that come to my mind right away, but I'm going to hand it over to you guys and you tell me what you think.
Alex, so I have a 6th house stellium, but when you talked about the last time you talked about the 6th house, I don't remember for what time, but you were talking about the idea of acceptance and how the 6th house can be like an access point to that through enduring difficulty and suffering. And that is what comes to mind here, that like Pluto and Capricorn has been presenting you with opportunities, if we want to put it in a nice way, to do that, to like find acceptance through the difficulty and to persevere through challenging times. But Mars in the 12th kind of feels like, wow, I'm really tired of that. Like, please, can we not? And which, that's very vague, but another Leo rising I know is kind of going through a really hard time with work. Where they are not feeling seen, appreciated. This has been going on for a long time, and they're not being heard. So I think for Leo risings, like obviously that's a specific example, but Mars in the 12th as feeling just like this inner sense of impotence and maybe futility, even like what's the point? And I want to encourage Leo risings to, when this opposition perfects, to not let that be the end of the story. Like if you're really feeling down or really like stunted or stuck, when Mars moves into the 1st house, there's this courage. There's this, you know what? I need to do this. I can do this. I am doing this. So I think that while the opposition could feel very confronting and challenging, it's giving me redemption vibes. And what's that tarot card where they're judgment? It's like that for me. Yeah.
Judgment card. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys for bringing me all the feels. So I appreciate it. No, this is not to be too dark. And I know we've talked a lot about Stephen King with Mars in Cancer, because he has Mars in Cancer very prominently. But this transit feels a little bit like one of my favorite stories, which is It. Even though I'm terrified of clowns, I'm petrified of them. But there's that feeling of, one of the things I find really beautiful about that book, because I think it is a real description of childhood trauma and things that have happened to us that has robbed us of our innocence, and the clown being so many symbols of that, is that the people in the town don't know what's going on. They don't see what's going on. There's always that talk about how no one really did much or saw much that was happening. And I feel like that's very what you were saying, Dana, about a feeling of futility of Mars in the 12th, of like, I know there was an action. I know there was something that happened here, but it wasn't acknowledged, or it was hidden, or it was confused in some way. There was like some kind of mirage put up. And I feel like the opposition to Pluto in the 6th is you may see truly what happened, and it's maybe not be pretty, but there's a sense at least of that acceptance of, it's like when you know something, but you're being told something else, or there's some kind of intentional and unintentional gaslighting. Your body knows that. You feel the incongruence. And then when you hear the truth, even if it's a confronting truth or a challenging truth, there's like suddenly a feeling of like your body just goes, yes, that. And so I feel like we are, as Leo risings, really well set up to, if we need to confront those ideas or see the clown for what it is, or those sorts of things, we're well set up for it. Because when Mars moves into Leo, there's a real like,
then you're gonna go kill the clown. You're gonna go fuck him up.
That's when we go back to the town. We get our torches, our bow and arrow. We go down into that sewer.
That's right.
We get the mofo. Yeah, exactly. Especially with the sun in Scorpio and mutual reception, ain't that clown? Watch out. But out of the way. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a little dark, but I think ultimately healing. I
really like the idea of things that have been kept from your view or complete, conscious, clear understanding coming to the surface through this, because that subterranean place is invisible. It's deep. It's dark with Scorpio. Mars in the 12th hitting Pluto and then moving into the visible space of the 1st just feels like a very empowering understanding of something that maybe has not been clear or has been hidden, maybe has some history or ancestral shadow work at play. It feels completely spot on, and I love the connection to it, because it's like the clown in the clown that terrorizes the child in the sewer. Like, what an archetypal! He's so good at writing these archetypal images, especially around youth, the loss of innocence, things that should be safe but aren't. He's just brilliant at that.
Mm-hmm.
Very Mars and Cancer. We've talked about that before, but okay, let's move on to Virgo. And with the sign of Virgo, we're going to hand this over to Dana, and I will draw.
Okie dokie. So Virgo risings, Pluto has obviously been in your 5th house for quite some time, transforming, confronting you around your creative process, what you make, what you offer the world. Children, of course, like the children in your life, whether you're a parent, an aunt, a godmother, or whatever. There's been a lot of change and maybe confronting or challenging moments here since 2008. I've been thinking about like being forced to let go of the grip, maybe, around how your creations are perceived, because we are talking about Virgo risings here, not to stereotype, but there's a desire to be perceived in a certain way, perhaps, that Pluto has forced you to kind of let go of a little bit. With Pluto, I always think about how it kind of forces us to let go of control. It's about power. So there's that. Mars is in your 11th house. So bringing up discord in your groups, perhaps. I was thinking about feeling helpless or frustrated around how to navigate discord in the group, but this could also speak to where you're going, like knowing that the 11th house is the house of your hopes and your ambitions. So perhaps a feeling of aimlessness with like, what am I doing? Where am I going? And the opposition implicates your creative work, the things you make, what you want to give of yourself to the world, and how does that fit with where I'm going, and can I really do this? So I'm thinking about that with the opposition, but wondering if there's an opportunity for your creative process to really take you somewhere deep and allow that catharsis to happen. Like maybe there's a way to work with this creatively, and I'm not just talking about like arts and crafts, although do that, like that sounds awesome, but you can create in ways that aren't stereotypically art. Like writing is creating. Like anything that you take out of your inner world and into the tangible is creating. So I think that there's real potential for healing around like allowing yourself to be seen in a new way and like letting it just be what it is. Pluto's moving into your 6th house. So this is going to be bringing to the surface what you need to address, maybe regarding your health. It's time to do hard things, when Pluto's in the sixth house. But these are also things that, like we were saying a moment ago about the sixth house, kind of allow you to open up to the beauty of life. I don't want this to sound like toxically positive or optimistic or something, but I feel like sixth house experiences allow you to realize that suffering is optional. Like, there are hard times in life and there's no escaping the difficulty of those things. And I don't want to minimize that, but the way that you approach these hard times can make all the difference. And that's what a spiritual practice is, right? I think that's the opportunity with Pluto in the sixth house is there's, a strength maybe in doing hard things. And yeah, they're going to be presented to you, but maybe you can learn a new way of working with them.
I love that. There's, that Pluto in the sixth house, I've been thinking a lot about that lately, just having gone through Pluto in the sixth house for what feels like 500 or 600 years. There's a feeling of an Alice in Wonderland kind of transit. And, in the sense of you go on this unanticipated journey and you go down to a place in the underworld where things don't often make a lot of sense intellectually. I think this is hard. This can be harder for Mercury ruled signs because there's usually a sense of wanting some kind of logical analytical capability to suss things out. Pluto moving through the sixth house, I know this is an air sign, so it might be a little bit different, but there's a feeling where you have to really rely on the primal senses and your base intuition and having someone help you interpret those feelings and images that don't always make sense. When Alice is encountering so many things that don't make sense, they're odd or out of place in some way. They have some relationship to the upper world, but they're kind of skewed in some way. And a lot of underworld stories have that feeling. And I think the sixth house to me is like that unanticipated Alice in Wonderland journey that you may not have anticipated that you were going to take. But it ultimately can, if you, like you said, suffering is optional. If you can work with it and be curious through the process, you wind up in some pretty incredible places too. I'm not going to sugarcoat and say it's all easy, but I will say that I know from experience, if you really just get curious and you are tenacious, the sixth house transit can bring you to some pretty remarkable places too.
I can't help but think about my about to be 9-year-old daughter who is going to have Pluto. She's a Virgo rising, so she'll have Pluto moving into her sixth. And I have watched under the last 2 ingresses where it's like little clues as to what kind of great work is going to occupy the next 20 years of her life. I have seen emerging. Under each transit, she has gotten completely enamored by something that she wants to get really good at. This is part of the sixth house too. The joy of Mars, a Dharma house, a house that's connected to everything that you have to labor in order to perfect. It's kind of like an apprenticeship. It's like chopping wood and carrying water is so much of what we all do to get good at anything we do, whether it's teaching like Dana, or if it's yoga teaching like Alex has done, or if it's, doing astrology readings, which we've all done. You have to do a lot of it. You have to read a lot. You have to study a lot. You have to look at a lot of charts. And the sixth house Pluto, I think for a number of Virgos, is going to be about things that things that capture your imagination and that you feel like you're going to start learning, studying, practicing, developing, but it requires a lot of hard work, and you won't see, the sixth house, you don't often see a lot of profit or benefit from. But I'm thinking about my 9-year-old and thinking, whatever events are happening this month with the Pluto-Mars opposition, what will that do for, in my case, like a little girl? For example, this is something I can't help but think about. What impressions does she have as a 9-year-old really about her first conscious presidential election?
Mm.
What is she going to see unfold in the collective? How will that impact her little developing sense of dharma and what she's here to build and what work she's here to do in the world? And because even though you're 9 years old, this is a 20-year long transit. She'll be near her Saturn return, by the time it finishes up.
Wow.
And probably coming into her adult, work. And it will have been something that she's been building the whole time Pluto will have been in Aquarius in her 6th house. Or let's just say that there's, here's an example. I've been telling everybody this transit will coincide with my dad having a knee replacement surgery. I've mentioned this a few times in recent videos. Let's just say that, I don't know, let's say the surgery is successful and Virginia sees grandpa and hears all about the surgery. 20 years later, she's finishing med school. You wouldn't think those events are connected. And they don't have to be connected in some literal sense where she goes, aha, I want to be a surgeon. But the events can be thematically connected in ways that are really subtle. And you may even forget, oh gosh, yeah, when that started, there was a surgery and she was really enamored by it. She talked to grandpa all evening when we visited him about how the knee was replaced and all this stuff. Or what if he died during the surgery? I mean, God forbid, but what if he died? And what if we said, there was this danger in the surgery? What if she became enamored with medicine for that reason? I mean, I'm not saying, I have no idea what's going to happen. I think it'll be fine. But the point is that you just don't know what little events can set in motion a long process, like a magnum opus that begins now with some feeling of there are things that I want to throw myself into, some great work that I want to start building or working toward.
And I think that's perfectly said, Adam, about like how with Pluto, especially in the underworld, like they're not sequentially related. You wouldn't see it as some kind of sequence that would necessarily be related, but it's some little touchstone that even in her subconscious, she might not know that would affect her even way down the line. It's amazing. She'll be almost 30 when Pluto leaves.
Yeah, exactly.
Aquarius. Yeah, it's crazy. Wow.
I loved that take on the 6th house too, Adam. Like as somebody with a lot of planets there, it's hard to not, even as an astrologer, it's hard to not like, pigeonhole that place. So thank you for that. Thank you for that.
I'm doing a talk in December on the 6th house. And I'm talking about the difference between slavery and sacrifice as a core theme of the 6th house that is often, it's really about the planets in the 6th and the ruler of the 6th. And what testimonies are being provided to the ruler of the 6th or planets in the 6th that often determines whether we experience the 6th in terms of lots of adversity, or if it translates more into one of those charts where you see someone who has like their life is like a workshop of some kind. And it's amazing how you could actually delineate along the lines of what planets are there, where the rulers are, the testimonies. But it's not really appropriate to think about the 6th purely in terms of like slavery and sickness and it really has to do with what the tone of adversity looks like in our lives. For some people, the tone of adversity is, a part of their very being, like a bodybuilder or a competitive skier or something. And that's why it's a Mars house, So yeah, just those differences though are, especially when you study Hellenistic and you see how bleak the text can get around the 6th, it certainly helps.
Yeah.
Well, okay, let's move forward to Libra. And we will hand it over to Alex again.
All right. Libras. Well, Dana, here we go.
Yay.
Let's see what's going on. let's check it out. So I could see maybe something a little similar to Cancer risings, but I think that let me start here. Pluto from in the 4th house opposing Mars in the 10th. I could see, very much like your opposing sign of Aries, there being some push and pull between public and private spheres of life. Some sense of the, Mars in Cancer being a sort of like, what is the role I want to have in the world? Am I balanced enough in how I am providing for, caring for, nurturing, giving to others, and am I balanced between the individual? It's very similar, I think, to Cancer rising, except I think this is more about like, is what you're doing in the world, whether it's your job or how you're known, though it may be comfortable, is it something that is allowing you some personal individual satisfaction? that is allowing you to say, thank you for the affirmation, that allowing you to say, like, you know, I love doing this. I love being a teacher, for random example, but then I also love to go for a walk or go to the gym or go to kickboxing and do something for me. I'm just thinking kickboxing because of Mars. But there's also, it feels like, you know, with Pluto in the fourth house, the sort of the coda of a long period of the transformation of your internal private space, like where you land at the end of the day. Adam, I always like how you talk about the fourth house and that idea, right? Where you land, how that space is, what that space is like, some significant transformation going on in that. And I think as Pluto moves out of the fourth house, there strikes me like somewhat of a, all right, well, this is the space I'm in now. This is the space that I'm working with. This is how things are. It may have been challenging. There may have been some turnover. There may have been some, like, you know, cogs that got, you know, stuck in the wheel. But eventually there's this sort of, like, as Pluto moves on, it's like, this is a transformed inner private space in which I didn't expect it to look like this, but now it does. And I'm okay with it. Those are my general thoughts on Libra rising.
Ooh, that was good, Alex. That really got me. God, you know, I'm sorry, Libra risings, because I feel like I can't help but project. Like, I'll do my best not to, but I'm pretty sure that all of us have had a crazy reckoning with home and family since 2008. Maybe you've moved a lot. Maybe you've seen some shit with your family that you did not know was there, and you were maybe a little bit surprised. Like, I found out I had relatives through DNA testing when Venus was retrograde in Capricorn a couple of years ago. That was pretty crazy. Needless to say, like, a transformation of your family is a very deep transformation of you, because you understand yourself through the lens of your family first and foremost. So it's been very personal, even though it's not the first house. And I think with Pluto moving into the fifth, I've been thinking a lot about, like, with Libras, kind of similar to what I said with Virgos, like there's a need to make it perfect, or to make it just so before you let the world see it. And I think Pluto is not going to allow us to be so precious with our work anymore, and with what we're trying to create and build and give. Do it. Like, stop it. Like, let's just express ourselves. And especially with that trine to the first, I think there's a lot of potential for, like, really freeing ourselves up and thinking about Mars in the 10th too. I kept thinking with this opposition, and I guess specifically with Mars, about grief, like knowing we're at the anaretic degrees here. Something is ending. Like, you're realizing that something has run its course, maybe in regards to your career, but real change is scary and it requires courage. So I like the idea of maybe Mars moving into Leo for all of us being like that courage that you need to really let go and, like, cut the thing that Mars wants to cut. For Libras, maybe it's something about who you are in the world.
Nice. I was recently studying some of the meanings of the houses in Indian astrology, especially as they're connected through the trines. And the fifth house, one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that it was associated with the good karma that you have from past lives that will somehow come to bless you in this life and provide you with happiness. Like, that's an interesting, I mean, in ancient Hellenistic astrology, the fifth house is called the joy of Venus and the house of good fortune. Good fortune is not so different from good karma in the way that fortune and karma are understood as philosophical concepts. I just wonder if Librans are about to have some very life-changing good fortune in the next, say, year. The reason that I wonder about that is that Pluto's name literally means riches. It's entering the fifth house of good fortune, which both in the East and the West, ancient astrology says has something to do with things that come to you as a matter of fate that are fortunate. So I'm sure that Libras will love to hear that. But then when I pair that alongside of this very cathartic Mars-Pluto moment, I also just feel like I want to tell Librans, whatever drama presents itself imminently in your life, your family, your work, just know that this is initiating what could be a development of very good fortune. There may be a very significant silver lining behind the sequence of events that's coming. I know that's a kind of weird way of looking at it, but I just can't help but think about some of the things I've been reading about lately and how fifth house transits often coincide with like the sort of good fortune that we have. Not surprisingly, like just as an example, did you know that there is a very common way in which people, when they have south node transits through the fifth house, will often feel like some of the things that they're used to being really good and like effortless will feel a little bit more difficult? Because the south
I
node
just had that once the south node was in Sag. Literally, that's so funny. Yeah, that
and
period of time.
there can just be a way in which it's like, this is usually not this difficult, like just different aspects of life. And then when the south node leaves, it gets a little bit easier. And that's because in ancient astrology, in Hellenistic astrology, the south node was said to curb or diminish the anything benefic. It kind of lessened it. So in the house of good fortune, and it makes sense, right? But anyway, I think the point here is that Librans have a lot to look forward to, because the other thing I wanted to add to this, the reason I said that, is that isn't it interesting that in a couple of years, not only will Pluto be in that house, you'll have Uranus in the 9th, trining it, and you'll also have you will have eclipses, north node eclipses in the 5th. I just feel like Librans aren't that far away from some really interesting, like beneficial changes that are part of your good karma in this lifetime. And we all have periods like that. And I think I'm starting to think about them a lot more as 5th house periods.
Cool. Well,
So Dana, get ready.
Yeah, I'm here for
And
it.
you get a car, and you get a car.
Oh, I love it.
All right, so let's move on to Scorpio. And here we have the Mars-Pluto opposition opposite Tauruses across the 3rd and the 9th, now the 9th and the 3rd. This along with Pluto moving into Aquarius in the 4th house. You know, what's interesting is that if I had to utilize a tarot card for Pluto's movement into the 4th, I would pick the Judgment card. Same card you were reflecting on earlier. There is something about rising from the dead that comes to my mind. Pluto entering the 4th house is... I've been listening to this podcast called The Emerald that I'm absolutely in love with. I really, really like it, and I highly recommend it. For people who like my channel, I feel like I'm cut from the same kind of spiritual cloth as the gentleman who writes and produces that podcast. And I really appreciate what he has to say about animism. And he was talking about guardianship in a recent episode that had to do with just developing a relationship with animate powers, the directions, the spirit of the river, just being, it's a very prime, archaic and sort of primal consciousness to be in touch with animate powers, the genie of your house, that kind of thing. Pluto entering the 4th for Scorpios, I think, is going to be about putting you in touch with animate powers that like are living like in your home from your ancestral spirits. I think it has this kind of way of lifting things that you might think to be dead and presenting them as very much alive. And also for Scorpios, and not that I think Scorpios ever really need a wake-up call. It's like one of the last signs I would ever think of as needing a wake-up call. But Pluto into your 4th can be a wake-up call in terms of just, if there's one thing that Scorpios often don't see, it's the bigger objective picture because of how deeply and emotionally entangled they get with things. And I think generally that's a good thing for Scorpios. It's what allows life to be so present and like alive and intense in a good way. But this is kind of like it puts Scorpios in touch with some kind of huge matrix of being that is there, that may become like kind of rising up from the dead or rising up into your consciousness. So that's one thing that comes to my mind, that this kind of trigger of Mars-Pluto shifts something paradigmatically that then stirs something to life in a very like rooted, like root level way for Scorpios. The other thing I would think about would frankly just be major shifts with respect to family karma, your home, your living environment, that when Pluto enters the base of your chart, the foundations of your life are going to tremble and shake and quake. And, there may be quakes. I was talking about the karmic fault lines in a video that was published today. there may be slippage of plates moving around. I think about those kind of images for Scorpios right now with Pluto about to enter the fourth.
It's the Libra moon fighting the Libra rising, so we're polite. Who's gonna go next? No, you. I love that, and I think that Scorpio's such an interesting sign because as it represents the middle of autumn in the northern hemisphere zodiac light cycle, we can become really obsessed with this idea of Scorpio and death and everything about being dead and dying. But so yay, but I think of like the classic image from the 90s, when we were growing up out of it, like the goth, the goth look,
Right.
like there had that sort of feel. But I actually think that deep down, Scorpios are very invested in the preservation of life, and that they're really carrying that last little tiny ember of light down towards the winter solstice at Capricorn. And that Pluto also has this quality, I think, I really like this idea of kind of lighting up or re-energizing that commitment as it moves into the fourth house. That commitment to that little grain of light, that little tiny spark that never really goes away and can be hidden, and then can be reanimated in some way or reshaped in some way, or the bellows can be put on it and it becomes bigger. And there's a sense where the base of your life, though, it may tremble and quake a little bit, there may be some kind of re-energizing period that begins here for you, that reinvests you back in your life force.
It's like the picture. Sorry, before I'll interrupt just for a second, Dana. The image of the Judgment card that calls dead things to life, and that rises some kind of primordial spirit back to life at the foundations. But the foundations may need to move around to accommodate it. Maybe that's a way of putting it.
Love that. Well, that was brilliant. With Mars in the 9th, and just thinking about Mars in Cancer sort of feeling a little aimless or stuck or frustrated, I was thinking about nihilism and feeling a little like there's a potential for feeling like things are pointless, or like, what's the point? Especially like as this opposition starts to perfect, it might be hard to care. But perhaps the opposition can, when you get to that point, that's when you can really, that's a good question to ask. Like, okay, well, why should I care? What do I care about? Like, the point of asking that question or getting to that place is not to stay there. It's to recognize what is really important to you. What do you really believe? What are your values? Just thinking about the 9th house. And with Mars moving into the 10th, there's courage to like embody what you do really value and believe in. Certainly Pluto in the 4th. You guys were reminding me of, I talked about this a while ago, like on Instagram, but there's this literary critic who talks about American literature as epitomizing regeneration through violence. And that phrasing just felt so Plutonian to me. And not that it has to be physically violent, but that there is a change, like that tectonic plate, that description that you guys were speaking to. Really seeing your family in different ways, and that changing the way you see yourself and how you fit in and the people you come from, and kind of uncovering some things about them and about who they are and therefore who you are, that at this point especially might change your basic operating principles.
Yeah.
Love it.
Nice. Let's go on to Sagittarius. And that's what I was saying earlier, by the way, when I said we can either beat each other up and learn from the process of trauma and healing from trauma, or we can try to make it smoother. Because it's like, that is such a, like, I just thinking about how that critic described American literature. I mean, I think that's a bit of, I mean, maybe that's the revolution of Pluto and Aquarius too, is like, hey guys, there's a different way other than bloodshed and trauma to grow, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, Sagittarius, let's hand this over to you, Dana.
Okie dokie. Pluto's been in your second house, guys, of talents, resources, and surely there's been lots of transformation there around what you have at your disposal, whether that's your money, your talents, your sense of self-worth, what you literally have, as well as your idea of what you have to give, I would imagine have changed quite a bit since 2008. Mars is in your 8th house. This could have you feeling kind of stuck or frustrated in the agreements you're a part of, feeling like you're not getting what you need maybe, or what was agreed to is not what's being given. Frustration around wanting more, wanting to make changes or somehow negotiate or renegotiate the terms of something. And this opposition to me suggests a moment of reckoning, a moment where, you maybe have to speak up and say like, no, here's what needs to happen. And maybe you're waiting for someone to give it to you and you're realizing, no, I actually have to I'm a part of this. And that means I have to speak up. I have to, I have to do my part here. And I think with Mars then moving into the 9th, this moment maybe gives you an opportunity to, think about your values in relation to the agreements that you're a part of, a courageousness to explore new paradigms and perspectives that can help you get to where you want to go and maybe serve any kind of ambition that's coming to the surface. So I think that when Mars is in Leo, this is going to be a really good time to explore those foundational beliefs. Pluto is going to be moving into your 3rd house. So your village is changing somehow, whether that's the people you interact with on a daily basis, your siblings, your commute, the way you communicate. There's something about the way that you live your life on like a small scale that's going to be transformed by this. I was also thinking about the 3rd house as the joy of the moon. And, the way that you feel maybe comfortable or like what is comfortable kind of being outgrown in some way. And I think overall, this is like a moment of being invited to be more mindful and intentional about your daily life and maybe aligning with your values in a more clear way.
Oh, I love that, Dana. I've been thinking a lot about the Aquarius 3rd house this weekend. We were down in New York City visiting friends and just hanging out and seeing shows and stuff. And we stayed in Queens, so we had to take the subway, the E-train from Queens into Manhattan and back, which was really interesting because you see an Aquarian 3rd house on the subway in New York City. It's like every bit of humanity surrounding you, every kind of person. Someone gets on the train in a Baby Yoda costume, like nobody notices, no one sees, no one even cares. Everybody's just kind of doing their thing, and like all of these, really interesting, eclectic people around. It was also Comic-Con in New York City this weekend, so it was like a lot of costumes and interesting stuff, and everybody's just kind of like, yeah, this is kind of just what's happening on the subway in New York City. There's a very eclectic mix, and so I feel like with Pluto moving into the 3rd house, there's a sense where you want to notice, like on your own sort of subway car, like, yeah, well, what's going on that's just kind of eclectic, fun, and interesting, but like, where's something where it's just like, that's out of place, or that doesn't seem quite right, or like, this, like I was saying before, we were doing the introduction about like a corrupted data bit, like this stands out within this, even for like a kind of eclectic Aquarian environment, like that needs to be addressed or retooled or turned over in some way. So I think it's a really interesting transit, really long-term process-oriented transit for Sagittarius risings of, doing what Sagittarius do best, which is explore. But, looking at not letting your optimism and hope override your like sense of like these things are not like the others. There's something here that doesn't quite make sense and not maybe in a way that needs to be addressed. Or you just enjoy really eclectic, really fun, interesting surroundings for the next 20 years. It could be that too, but I was just thinking a lot about that this weekend.
Interesting. One of the things that comes to my mind here is about, conflicts over values or resources across the 2nd and the 8th, moments of accumulated debts karmically or financially, and moments of transformation that have to do with addressing them. And then Pluto into the third for me speaks to the, I think there's something always about the environment mentally and emotionally, but also physically around us, as well as something like the culture of our lives going through a change. Pluto in Aquarius strikes me as a good opportunity for study or learning. I'm sure some Sages will start they'll start studying something. And then I wouldn't be surprised if the environment around you becomes much mentally or intellectually, like more philosophical, more political or ideological, if there isn't an ongoing need to learn or change the way you think or understand the world, or maybe like relocate yourself somehow in a different mental or cultural environment. So those are some of the things that come to my mind. Well, on that note, let us shift into Capricorn, and we'll hand back over to Alex, and I will highlight for you. Here we go.
I love getting Capricorn rising because this is where we bring up Frodo all the time. Just going to put that out there. That's the only mention I have, and here we go. All right, so Capricorns, I want you to just be relieved. That's my big thing for Capricorns is Pluto is going to move out of your first house. Pluto's been in your first house for 16 years. I think that it will take some time and reflection to look back on these 16 years to see how much you have changed, whether that's physically, emotionally, psychologically, your identity, probably all of that mixed together at different times. So as Pluto moves out of this space and off of 29 Capricorn, and it has this extremely cathartic revelation with Mars in your 7th house, this to me really speaks about who am I as my own, I'm going to use a word you don't really love, sovereign self, your own sovereign self. And, how are you in relationship, and what has been needling in you in your relationships, or your relationship style, or the way you are in relationship, or the way you have been, and whether you're in one or you're dating or whatever your relationship status is, what has been needling you? What has felt like this hasn't quite allowed me to get to the base truth of who I am? And there's some kind of revelatory process that happens here, maybe quite dramatically, that allows you to put one final period on the sentence of this transformation of your sense of self and be like, you know what, this is who I am. And some people like it, some people don't. This has worked for some relationships. It hasn't worked for some relationships. It's irritated some people love it. So I'm going to go with my people. I'm going to go with the people who adore me for who I am, and who want to be with me for exactly who I am, where I don't have to feel in any way that I'm compromising some kind of something I need to feel emotionally safe or secure or stable within the relationship from the outside, but I feel stable inside of myself. And then that locates maybe a correction in a relationship or a shift in a relationship, or it helps you find relationships that are more really about who you are, who you feel yourself to be.
Yeah, I think the Cap risings I know, like, spot on. And it's probably so obvious how Pluto has been working in your first house. Like, I doubt you're going to need to spend a ton of time in reflection to connect those dots. But there is something so empowering about Pluto, despite how chaotic and terrifying, frankly, it can be. There's something so empowering about it. It shows you what you're capable of. And I think about this final opposition as very empowering in a sense, though provoking, of course, though potentially like nuclear in a way. Like, there could be a break in our relationship. There doesn't have to be. But I think it has the potential to allow Cap risings to embody and integrate that power that maybe Pluto has given them.
Yeah. I'm thinking about, same thing we were looking at with Cancer rising, where there can be something happening in the life of someone close to you. that is also of great significance for you personally. And what to speak of, obviously, the potential for conflicts or catharsis in relationships that are personal, a catharsis for someone you are close to, or even a family member with Mars and Cancer in the 7th could come up. Also, I think questions about boundaries in relationships come to mind. One thing that is interesting with Pluto heading into the 2nd is the idea that you're about to go through a shift with respect to things like money and finances, and your values in connection to what you possess, what you have, what you own, how you earn, how you use what you earn. Interestingly, as one of the Arta houses, the houses associated with work, vocation, and things like success and wealth and power in the world, which are temptations for all of us, even if we are people who say, well, I'm not in it for power. Yeah, but it is a temptation. Like anytime you hit a little bit of success, start feeling yourself. Those are challenges that come with Pluto entering the 2nd too. How can I be wealthier? Well, how can I be wealthier in a way that is also in line with my values? Questions like that can come up. In Indian astrology, there is an association with anyone or anything that has acted as a bolster for your material health and nourishment, like your family is associated with the 2nd house insofar as they've acted as people who have fed and clothed you. And so another thing that's interesting is that Indian astrologers will take certain transits to the 2nd house to potentially be about things or people that you rely on. And that can include family. I love that in ancient astrology, in the East and the West, there is never just one house that covers one topic. There are usually multiple houses that will bring up the topic in a different context. How we rely on family members for the sake of support is different from maybe the 4th house version of family in some way.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is just that there could be some significant moments of change with respect to who you rely on and what kinds of support you have. And that could extend really into any area of your life, including even family members and how they need support or how they give support. And so just kind of keep an open mind about what that might look like is I guess what I'm getting at.
Love it.
All right. Well, for the sake of time, we're going to move right along to Aquarius. I have to get going pretty soon. I'm almost out of time. So let's take a look at this, and we'll go a little bit. We won't go too quickly. We won't. Don't worry. I think for Aquarians, when I think about the 1st house and this transformation, I'm thinking, yeah, there is a kind of catharsis here that is a trigger point for another ingress of Pluto into your 1st house, which is about the very deep level at which your very sense of identity and purpose is transforming. Coming into a greater degree of personal power is a real possibility with Pluto entering the 1st house. Coming into a period of crisis personally, of transformation of your health or body, of a long, slow process of identifying who you are and who you are not. But it's always very existential in the 1st house, and Pluto lends some of those deeper explorations of power and identity, of powerlessness and what real power means for the life of the soul. It's a spiritual sense of what empowers me. So I think Aquarius risings are heading in that direction. And I often notice that Pluto in the 1st house will be very empowering for people, but you almost right away, you have to start going like not feeling yourself and being like, yeah, I deserve this, it's better to be thankful for whatever you receive if you find something really empowering happening as Pluto's entering your 1st house, without kind of taking that egotistical credit for it that might start you on a bit of a downward spiral, because Pluto's subtle like that. Pluto moves in some ways invisibly, and that the visible part you see is like a gold coin, but the invisible part is the string connected to Hades, So you just have to be just aware of, Pluto wants us to, I think, develop a healthy relationship with power. So what does that look like? So that's where I'm going to leave it there.
You guys, I just feel like with Pluto going down into the first house, one of the things I noticed with Aquarius is people with strong Aquarius in the chart is they're always looking for interrelationships. That they'll ask questions about like, well, all right, that's there, but like, how does that fit with this? But this goes to this, and how does this all fit together in this grand sort of scheme? Like I think of if you guys saw the Queen's Gambit, where the woman she would watch the chess pieces being put together on the ceiling in her mind, right? There was that really great animation. That's a very Aquarian type of idea. It's very cerebral, right? I'm putting together this together in my mind. As Pluto goes down into your first house, there's going to be a wonderful way that you can start to rely more on your just kind of gut sense, your gut primal intuitive knowing. And that can be a really interesting space for Aquarius risings to explore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the Aquarius rising people that I know and how Pluto in the 12th has been quite provoking, not surprising, but really forcing you to get yourself right, like getting your inner world organized and attending to the blind spots because they've been here they are. What are you going to do? Right. And so I really love what you said, Adam, about like personal power and this being an opportunity to embody the lessons of the 12th house in a very empowering way, because, it's not we can get something out of hard times. And I think that this is maybe an opportunity for Aquarius risings, this opposition between Mars and Pluto. Challenging, yes, but also maybe like helping you understand how your hard work can really help you and how it has helped you, not just with Mars in Cancer, but with everything you've endured with Pluto in the 12th house, really bringing those lessons into your conscious awareness.
Yeah. Let's move on to our final sign, which is Pisces. You will be first next time, Pisces, not last. Dana, what do you think about this one? And I'll cue it up for you. Here you go.
Here we go, Pisces. So Pluto's been in your 11th house of groups, hopes, and dreams. Really, I thought about this like transforming the vision for your life and the affiliations that you have and you're a part of. Could see the last 16 years or so as having been transformational in the causes you dedicate yourself to, maybe facing fears or confronting power struggles within the groups you're a part of, really learning lessons about the power of the collective voice and advocacy. And really, I could see that having been a big part of Pluto and Capricorn for you. Right now, Mars is in your 5th house, and this could be creating some kind of frustration or stuckness around your self-expression, maybe feeling creatively impotent, or, we could even take it to like challenges with conception. This could be like a, more textbook kind of read, but could be about children, could be arguments about children, or just generally feeling like there's not a lot of energy around that right now. The opposition, it brings up feelings like it'll never work, or I should just give up. Thinking about Pluto in the 11th house of hopes and dreams, and maybe in the 5th house, like something you're trying to bring out into the world. There's a feeling of hopelessness, maybe. And I want to say that's not the end of the story, because Mars then moves into your 6th house. And maybe you understand the ways in which if I put in the work in this way, maybe there's a different way, maybe there's a different approach. And if I really stick to it, and if I really like 8 of Pentacles, chip away and just keep doing the chipping, like I can get there. And so then Pluto moves into your 12th house, and we're composting the blind spots. We're getting deep into all the things that are at play and at work in your inner world that you maybe weren't aware of. So while, the 12th house is probably not the most fun house, it's not the house that we maybe look forward to having a Pluto transit in. It is a very productive and useful transit, I think, because it shows you the ways that you get in your own way. And it allows you to kind of free yourself from those things if you like meet those challenges with openness.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that, Dan. I think Pluto moving into the 12th house with Neptune eventually, next year starting to move out of your first house. All of this is completing some work that Saturn began in 2023 when it entered your first house, which is what's real and what's not. What's actually one thing that can be difficult for Pisces sometimes is like, what's my imagination? What's real? What actually happened? What didn't? Who am I and who am I not? And I think that these are very clarifying, somewhat seismic transits. And Mars opposing Pluto from the 5th house to the 11th house, the sort of cathartic transformation of like, this is my own expression of joy and pleasure and creativity. This is what I want. This is what works for me. I mean, just frankly, too, it could be just great makeup sex. I'm just going to say that. That's
fair. Yeah.
I think across that axis, that just needs to be said. That's a possibility. Yeah.
What comes to my mind here with Pluto entering the 12th is this is one of the moksha houses, and there's a way in which the failures and losses and unconscious blind spots, if we have any kind of self-reflection about them, there is such liberation, which is the meaning of the word moksha, that comes into our lives. And, I'm just thinking about how if there's any Pluto ingress that I had to pick that probably wouldn't make a huge splash right away, it would probably be Pluto entering the 12th. And the reason I say that is because there might be some events that come up that give you an initial sense of release or liberation from something stuck, or it's weird that a house associated with imprisonment is also the house that's associated with liberation. I mean, think about that, right? It's like, how many people, and I know this because I did some training to teach meditation in a prison, and then they canceled the program before I got to actually do it. But I did some training, and one of the things that was really interesting in the training process I went through was that one of the things that a lot of people brought up as to why spiritual and religious programs are so successful in prisons is that when someone is imprisoned and there's nowhere else to go, there's this complete and total surrender that is part and parcel of that for a large number of imprisoned individuals, or incarcerated, or whatever the correct word is. So there's obviously lots of issues with the prison system. I'm certainly not trying to say that, guess what, your secret redemption is prison. I'm not at all trying to say that. I'm just trying to say that sometimes when people are in an imprisoned state, even if it's metaphorical, they find themselves much more open to the idea of surrender. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if the silver lining of Pluto entering the 12th isn't that, look, life's going to go on being life, but there may be just a little bit more openness to that quality of surrender that instantly can transmute so many difficult things into blessings. Mm. Yeah. It's like, when I think about when I started attending Al-Anon and how much of a difference that's made in accepting things that I cannot change about my family and addiction patterns in the extended family and my wife's family and stuff like that. And it's the willingness to surrender comes with the prison of what you're living in, and you can't change. You can't get out of it, in a sense.
The 3 C's, man. They really liberate you. Yeah. Yeah.
So Pisces, I would say that also one thing that, the 12th house is associated with seclusion and privacy. And, Pluto in Aquarius, I can almost see Pisceans developing a little study in your house somewhere for meditation, for reading astrology texts, and for diving deeply into some otherworldly material that there's like a little bit of like the hermit card emerging in your chart right now too. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. That was a really nice journey through all 12 signs. I think we did a pretty good job. But I will leave that to all of you. We thank you guys for watching. I want to make sure that we can connect you with with Dana and Alex. Let me just get my stuff together here. Dana Solera, you can find her at selfhelpwitch.com, where you can book a reading with her, or Instagram, selfhelpwitch, where she will often create live streams or content devoted to astrology. So I highly recommend checking that out as well. And then where is Alex? Where is Alex? Here we go. So then Instagram, Alex Amorosi Healing, to follow all of Alex's good work or his newsletter, booking a reading with him. That's alexamorosi.com. So I highly recommend it if you want to break down some of these transits or the Pluto ingress or the Mars-Pluto oppositions that will come through the retrograde over the next months. You can do any of that and more with these fantastic astrologers. I highly recommend you do so. And so we'll leave you there for this month of November, and we will see you again in December to look at your December horoscopes. So yeah, hope you guys have a great month. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Everybody.